Playing a board game on a computer? Sometimes it can be convenient, sometimes it can feel a little daft. A game of Monopoly isn't quite the same if it's against a computer and doesn't feature the usual accusations, fisticuffs, lost friendships and 2 hours spent swearing and looking for the little dog piece. And that's even before you start it. Hi there, I'm Kim Justice. Maybe you know me from my mother base where I look at various things retro gaming related, but I'm here on an away mission for 40k theories. And chances are I annoyed you in the very first second of this video by saying board game instead of tabletop game, and generally being far too British, obnoxious and weird lispy sounding to the point where my host is immediately regretting asking me to make this video. Hey ho. Anyway, the subject of this video is an altogether different type of tabletop game that's given a new angle in virtual form. It's all about Space Hulk. Now, seeing as I'm on this particular channel, I'm going to assume that a lot of you already know a great deal about Space Hulk, so I don't need to go into much detail about the history of the game itself. But for me it is that brilliant sort of game, one that seems so complex and yet, well, it really is so simple, isn't it? As Robert Florence said about 10 times once, it is indeed man versus alien in desperate battle. A game of Space Hulk can take you to some dark places where one bad roll of the dice can mean total evisceration. It's tense, in almost any form. But if you don't necessarily feel like breaking out the board and the die-cast figures and such, there's a few computer games that have come out under the name. Fans could debate for ages over which game's done the best job, but I'm looking at the older one, 1993's Space Hulk, released by Electronic Arts for the Commodore Amiga. Whether you know much about the Warhammer universe or not doesn't really matter when it comes to enjoying Space Hulk, either in tabletop form or on the Amiga, as it's a neat condensation of various aspects of the universe into a rather action-packed form. To prepare for this vid, I looked at a couple of old magazine reviews, one from someone who knew about the origins of the game, and another who didn't mention Warhammer even once, and they both enjoyed the game for much the same reasons. You play as the Terminators, power-armoured space marines with frankly ridiculous shoulders, styled as if they're part of a Neo-Roman Empire, and you explore derelict ships, the titular Space Hulks, in search of technology, information or plain old violence. The violence will be provided by gene stealers, tyrannid alien predators who aren't interested in anything except your earthly husk. They thrive on ambushes and on not being seen until it's far too late, as many a squad has found out, much to their distress. Space Hulk on the Amiga goes for an interesting interpretation of a classic tabletop game. It's both faithful and unfaithful, not exactly action but not exactly strategy. You control the squad in first person using viewfinders, and while you can only control one Terminator at any time, you can see what everyone else can see at all times. Anyone who's not controlled by you automatically goes into Overwatch, but you can also go into the planning mode and set an automated path for them to take. Ideally you should freeze the game in order to plan this out, but be careful because you can only freeze a mission for a limited time, so don't use the freeze as an opportunity to make a cup of tea. It's not a pause button. That's about it really. If you see something moving in your view then, well, you should probably shoot it. And quickly. Gene stealers, much like the alien xenomorphs that inspired them, have no ranged weapons but are incredibly fast, and if they get close to you, yep, you're probably dead. And you will die. Again and again and again. Space Hulk is an interesting game to me, particularly in this form. It's one that I almost can't envision being the same if it were designed today. It would be deemed way too unfair. Your Terminators are always heavily outnumbered, armed with a bolter that tends to jam quite often. You don't know whether that blip on the radar represents a single gene stealer or an entire horde, and they kill Terminators almost as soon as they touch them. Space Hulk doesn't need more than one type of enemy. The one it's got is more than enough to make your chances of survival fall close to zero. I mean, thinking about it in modern game design terms, surely you've got to give these Terminators more of a chance, don't you? I mean, what about the balance? Unfair is a weird term to use to describe a game positively, but it's the whole crux, the genius of Space Hulk, and what makes it brilliant. You know what to expect as soon as you see a level titled Suicide Mission. The hope of surviving against the odds, the brave heroics, the unbelievable atmosphere and tension that the game creates. and in this Amiga version it comes off beautifully. The graphics have that old school computer dirt about them that I love so much, the hulks are suitably desolate, the sound is bare enough that every single moan of those gene stealers puts you on edge, and the music in menus is fantastic, all moody synth pads and slinky mod bass. It is not the sort of game that would be considered a traditional looker by any means, it's almost a reskinned Dungeon Master, but what's here works very well. It's the sort of game that's played with headphones in the middle of the night, the original survival horror tabletop game. Are there problems? Well, perhaps that mood won't be for everyone. And perhaps the difficulty won't be either. I barely need to tell you that this game is monstrously hard, and that you will be repeating missions a lot. One false move, and you're dead. Patience, planning and a strong constitution are required in order to play this game. That's all in the eye of the beholder, of course. If I had to pick one major issue, it's more to do with technical limitations, to be honest. The inability to actually play as the Gene Stealers themselves, which is often recommended with regular tabletop Space Hulk, playing missions twice with the players switching roles the second time around. It's understandable that the ability to play as the Gene Stealers isn't here, but it might make the game feel a little incomplete for some. Still, you do get a lot of bang for your buck. Not only do you get the whole of the Deathwind campaign, but there's plenty of single missions adapted from the board game to play around with. So at least if you do get stuck on something, which I do because I'm quite terrible at this game, at least you can play around with another mission for a while. So is Space Hulk on the Amiga still worth playing? Yes, undoubtedly. It's one of the few adaptations of a board game that's actually worth it, and even one that has a pretty good chance of pleasing those who already know and love the original tabletop game. I have no doubt that the people who made it loved the tabletop as it was, and they were determined to keep the game as faithful as possible to it. And the game itself was, in any case, really quite good. As old as it may be, it's one of the best games I can think of that's related to the whole Warhammer universe. It only requires the capacity to accept your inevitable and grisly death, to watch impassively as clumps of a once proud Terminator's intestines fall to the floor while you make notes on how to do better next time, and above all, to fear not your enemy, for they are an abomination. I've been Kim Justice, and this is 40K Theories. Bye for now.